I'd like to welcome you to Road to the White House. I'm David Caputo, professor of political science at Pace University. And today, even though we've been discussing about the presidential election, I need to make a little side excursion into the Senate and House, the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives, and the outlook for them in 2016. Why is this important? Well, because we're talking about something called candidates' coattails. Will a president be able to help people, candidates in his own his or her own party who are further down the ticket? Will they be able to help them gain extra votes and therefore be more successful? Most of the times we know that in a presidential year we have more people voting, usually 5 to 10% more people voting, and that translates then into, for whichever party gets that higher turnout, usually means that their candidates fare better. This particular Senate election is especially interesting and important for several reasons. Number one, right now, as you see behind me, there are 44 Democrats, 54 Republicans, 2 independents. One of those independents would be Bernie Sanders, and the other independent would be from Maine, the senator from Maine. They usually will vote for the Democrats. So the Democrats, so the partisan distribution is normally thought of as 54 to 46 at this point. So that would mean that if the Democrats can hold their seats and pick up 5 Senate seats, they would have control 51 to 49. Okay? Now, this is important because that would make it much easier if there's a Democratic president, or much harder if there's a Republican president, in terms of getting legislation passed. However, I want to point out to you that the magic number and really critical number for the Senate is 60, because with 60 you have much greater control over a variety of procedures, including the quorum, the cloture vote, which cuts off debate at 60. Even though that's been weakened by practices over the last couple of years, it's still an important point. So the last time we had 60 was after the 2008 election, and that's one of the reasons why President Obama was able to get the Affordable Health Care Act passed. He had enough votes to get cloture in the Senate to cut off debate, so it could not be filibustered. All right, so let's look at this for just a minute. So here's the partisan, the current partisan arrangement. In terms of 54-44. Here are the retiring incumbents. Okay, so Barbara Boxer, who's a Democrat, Barbara Murkowski, a Democrat, and Harry Reid, a Democrat from Nevada. So California, Maryland, and Nevada. The California seat is normally thought to be safe for the Democrats this year. Who knows? Maryland seat is thought to be safe. Nevada seat, however, is very competitive. Okay, Senator Reid won by a very narrow margin in 2010. Marco Rubio's seat in Florida, Dan Coates' seat in Indiana, those 2 seats, I'm sorry, the seats in Indiana and Louisiana are usually thought of as safe. However, there was a Democratic upset in 2012, so in Indiana. Florida seat's likely to be very competitive. So if you go, and the difficulty for the Republicans is that, remember, this 2016 marks the re-election process for the senators who were elected in 2010, which was a major landslide for the Republicans, and really the most significant advance at that point in time for the Tea Party and the very conservative candidates. So that if you look at how this gets rated, you can see the states that are safe Democratic, safe Republican, and so forth. So you may want to take a moment and look at that. You go down here a bit, you can see the various margins of victory and so forth. This is on Ballotpedia, which I would recommend. It has done a pretty good job here. I want to show you one other thing here, which I think is important. This is the past partisan background in terms of the various elections. Okay, this is interesting. This is what the Democratic and the Republican Senatorial Committee. Now this is the way the parties do this is they fund, remember when we talked about political financing, we indicated that there was a lot of activity not just in individual campaigns, but for Senate and House campaigns and so forth. So you can donate to this. Again, you're limited to $2,700, but you can contribute to these. So you can see where these are at this point. Democrats have $13 million on hand. The Republicans have $13 million on hand. Notice the Democrats have a debt of $7 million, which they've been paying down, but they still have a $7 million debt. So this is one of the reasons why fundraising by the candidates is so important. There was a lot of publicity about the Clooney dinner in Los Angeles. That was largely used and had Mrs. Clinton as the keynoter to raise money for candidates, not specifically for Mrs. Clinton. There was a lot of talk about, well, the top seat was $350,000. That would be money that would be distributed across not just the Senate and the House, but individual Senate and House seats. So keep that in mind. Now let's go to, I want to go for just a minute to something a little different here. Let's look at the House of Representatives. So there is some feeling that in the right set of circumstances that the Democrats could get control of the Senate back. Even if they did, they'd be far short of the 60 they would need to have procedural control. So look at the House of Representatives. Democrats with 188, one seat open, 246 for the Republicans, 435 total, so you need 218. So that means the Democrats would have to pick up 31 seats in order to have control of the House. That would be a major and significant change. If that were to happen, that's unlikely in a presidential year to have that many seats change hands. It's always possible. Could be more, could be less. You could have a number of Democratic seats go Republican. So in the House, 58 seat majority for the Republicans. Democrats would need to pick up 30 seats plus holding all their seats. If you look again at the fundraising, go to Ballotpedia, you can see where the various campaign committees are in terms of the House Republican and House Democratic campaigns. They've raised millions of dollars. Again, they'll be raising more money in the future. So I mention these, the House and the Senate, because this really characterizes why it's important who's at the top of the ticket. And there is concern, there's been voiced by some Republican leaders, that if Donald Trump has the nomination, that they will have difficulty below the ticket. And they will support him in name, but not in funding and other things. Instead, they will put their support to the House and the Senate candidates. Very difficult to do. And that assumes that Donald Trump is not going to run well. And in another lecture, I'll explain why I think Donald Trump is going to run much better than people think he will. So don't lose sight of the importance of these House and Senate races. They can be very bitter. They're usually involving as much local politics, state politics, as they are national politics, but whether or not a candidate breaks with the party is important. So for instance, in Illinois and New Hampshire, two closely contested seats held by Republicans, they have not broken with the party in terms of saying there should be hearings for the Supreme Court justice nominee. That may hurt them in those states when the election gets underway. So we'll see a lot of this going on over the next few months, but pay very careful attention to the Senate and House race. There's also such a thing as reverse coattails, where a presidential candidate could actually run behind the totals that a very popular person might be able to get. So that would mean in a strongly, with a Senate or House Republican, Senate or House Republican who's very popular, they may run ahead of the presidential candidate. Not unusual, it does occasionally happen. So keep watching for these trends as we go forward, and you'll see something fascinating. Bottom line is, I think there's an excellent possibility that whoever wins, if Trump wins, I think there's some possibility that he will have a Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House. If Mrs. Clinton wins, I think it's very unlikely that she'll have a democratically controlled House. She may have a Democrat majority in the Senate. In that particular case, it would be a continuation of possible gridlock unless the House Republicans were to agree that they need to get moving and try to work some things out with President Clinton. So keep this in mind going forward, something to watch for in the fall. In the fall course, I'll have much more to say about this. Thank you.